Hi guys, Alistair Taylor down here at Lytham Golf Academy, and today we're going to look at the 3 death moves that are stopping you hit driver as well as you can. Okay then guys, so the driver is definitely, for most golfers, the most emotional club in the bag. They can hit some wonderful tee shots, but the destructive ones become lost balls, and when guys sit around and talk afterwards, it's always those bad drives. And generally speaking, there's 3 moves that absolutely kill guys with driver. So the first move is initially how they get the club moving away from the golf ball. The second is more the position they get the club in at the top of the backswing. And the third is usually how they actually initiate that downswing. So let's run through the 3 stages, give you guys some feedback. You might be one of these, 2 of these, or all 3 of these. Have these little checks, see if it works for you, and then let's get you hitting driver further and straighter than ever before. So the first killer move with the golf swing for me is, because most golfers are very obsessed with trying to make the ball go straight, they don't allow the club to work correctly away from the golf ball. And what they tend to do is they feel that they want to keep the golf club looking at the golf ball for as long as possible. And a lot of guys, even though the club face is what we would call very closed at that position, if you were to then let the club move freely through impact, we'd just smother the ball left. But because most guys don't do that, they keep the club looking at the ball, and on the way through they try and hold the club looking towards the target, and it actually just produces the club face being wide open at impact. And where the club face is pointing is 95% influence, with a centered strike, on where the ball's going to set off. And unfortunately for most guys, the golf ball tends to set off further right than they need, or certainly right of where they've aimed, and then that ball's going to shape off to the right because the swing path will work to the left. So for me, a big thing that guys don't feel is how the club should work correctly away from the golf ball. And a great little drill for that is to lift the club up in front of you, a little bit like a baseball bat, and just get the club working away and then swinging back round. And what you'll start to feel is, as you swing back and forwards, it almost feels like the club face is just opening up a tiny bit. It's not, it's just remaining square to the arc, but just feels like it's opening up, and particularly on the way down then, it's allowed to re-rotate through. But the problem is, guys are really trying hard to keep it straight, and it creates extra issues. And then there's that guiding movement through impact, and we can see that club face way off to the right. So get that feeling of how the club starts to work. And even with this drill, it's great because it gives you a feeling of what you'd be looking for through impact. And I think if you can then take that movement down to the golf ball and get that feeling, you can certainly get the ball setting off in a much better direction. And as a result, the path will be closer to the club face. Therefore, you won't see as much shape straight away. So the first one is getting that club working away correctly from the golf ball. Now the second position, or second feeling that I think guys really struggle with, is once they have that movement, and even if they move away quite well, as they get to the top of the backswing, they tend to get the wrist joint very much underneath the shaft, and then the club face, the toe points straight down to the floor. And again, that club face now is very open. And then as we swing down, that again would deliver a very open club face. So it's difficult for everybody, and a lot is made nowadays about trying to feel that the club stays looking at the golf ball a little bit more. A lot of the top players talk about this. I think what a lot of club golfers, struggle with is a top player can maybe keep the club a little closed and be in a very strong position at the top. Because they're able to turn their body so far out the way, the club face stays in a good position. But for most club golfers, that club face is open, and then it's all about how they can compensate through impact. And a very weak position you tend to see with golfers is that the hands are way behind the ball, they've added loft, and that club face points to the right. So if we can, and it's not the easiest feeling, so it is something you'll need to practice, is as we get the club working away, we almost want to feel that that left wrist is a little bit flatter and that that club face is closer to kind of 45 degrees. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of guys stopping at the top and checking. I don't mind a little bit of it, but if you can get that feeling and then get the club working down, you'll still need to keep your body turning out the way and allowing the club to rotate correctly. But if we can get that wrist joint in a better position, the club face will be in a more neutral position and you don't have to compensate through impact. Now, this is something certainly for me that I've worked on over the years. I didn't really struggle with a slice, but I used to have to use my hands a lot to square the club face up, which made me very inconsistent. So now with more of that feeling, again, I can get the ball setting off a little straighter. Still, for me, shape it right to left, which is fine, but I don't feel I have to manipulate the club quite as often with my hands. So that's the first two death moves with driver. The final move is actually how we start our downswing. Now, a lot of guys will be very, very aware of we start our downswing from the ground up, and a huge amount is made about turning our lead hip out of the way. But also, one of the massive contributing factors with the golf swing to creating a slice is that the club works out and then from out to in and moves too much to the left through impact. So when that club face is pointing right, the ball's going to shape from left to right. Now, the little challenge for me is because most guys work so hard on that lead hip that as they get to the top and turn, we can see straight away that club gets thrown much more out in front of me. But if we look at the movement from face on, as I turn, the club goes out in front, but all my pressure is actually moving into my back foot, which again is going to create an out to in path and a very steep angle of attack. So a great feeling for a lot of guys is if you were going to throw a ball, you'd load onto your trail leg, and then from there your first movement would be actually a little bit of a sideways movement, and then the hip moves. And that's the exact same feeling we want with the golf swing. So we get to the top, we feel that the pressure moves onto our lead leg, and then we can turn out the way. So the turn's massively important, but there has to be some lateral movement. And what we'll see with that movement is we shift the pressure into our lead leg. Now we start to turn. Now the club drops more down rather than out, massively improving our path. And if the path's improved, we will definitely see less shape on the ball. The first one we said, where the club face points at impact, is going to influence where it sets off, but the path then influences the shape. So even if that club face was a little bit open, because the path is going to be a little bit more straight rather than to the left, we'd see less shape anyway. Now, it's hard if you're somebody with all three of these faults. I would suggest the first thing you work on is how you get in that club starting away, then a little bit of how it feels at the top, and then how we start that downswing, because the club face is going to be the biggest influence on the shot. Incredibly hard to do all three. If you want to challenge yourself, by all means try all three. But generally speaking, if you're doing all three, start with one, then two, then three. If you're only doing one of them, easy for you, you only need to work on that area. But I'm going to get all three of those going. And that's absolutely perfect. So guys, 3 death moves with driver. Try and work out which one of the 3, if not all 3, that you maybe struggle with. Work on the little things I've spoken about. Start hitting the best drives of your lives. Okay guys, so I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, like and share it. Comment below if you've tried it, let me know how it's worked for you. I will try and get back to all of you if I can. Subscribe to my channel if you don't already. Follow me on all the social media platforms, all under Ali Taylor Golf. Hopefully catch up with some of you guys down here in the future. Stay in contact.